Good afternoon. My name is Chloe, and I'd like to welcome you. I'd like to welcome you to the Memorial Drive. The reception will follow. We'd like to thank the estate manager, Hugo-Hamman, operations manager, and all ground staff for their meticulous preparation. My mother, Shishi, and Kate Laurel for the beautiful flowers. Ulrika Kruger, whose catering we look forward to, and Kate for everything else. I'm going to begin the proceedings with a message from Richard's daughter Louise, who is in Australia and regrets she is unable to join us. My heart aches that we farewell and celebrate the life of our father, Richard Dirk Hugo-Hamman. Devoted and loving dad, husband to Lynn, and grandfather to Mia, Selena, and Stella, who we miss beyond words. Dad's courage and perseverance set the course for our lives and shaped us into who we are today. Some lessons difficult, all powerful, and most importantly, that devotion, memory, and connection span beyond geographical distance and borders. A true warrior who fought bravely to the end, left us dignified and on his own terms. His resilience, generosity, and wisdom will resonate through the hearts that he touched and those that he inspired. I am grateful to be such a proud daughter. Rest easy, Dad. You are free. School has been kind and generous in allowing us to hold our celebrations at an institution that meant so much to us. We are very grateful for the enthusiastic participation of the orchestra under the direction of Levi Alexander, and we thoroughly enjoyed the performance of Eddie Elgar's. We have a program of speakers, and I'd like to introduce and thank the headmaster of the high school, Mr. Brendan Grant.
Thank you, Chloe. And on behalf of SACS, a very warm welcome to all of you to, as Chloe mentioned, the celebration of the life of Richard Hugo-Hamman. I'd like to make a special welcome to you, Dr. Chris Hugo-Hamman, wife, Shushi, Chloe, Clementine, Sarah, Richard's sister, Elizabeth, and also in Australia, watching on the stream, Richard's wife Lynn and daughter Louise. To our very special Hugo-Hamman scholars, past and present, and your families, and to all friends and family from around the world for joining us on the live stream, a warm welcome to SACS. When before I started here at our school 8 years ago, I had become aware of the incredible philanthropic work of the Hugo-Hamman family, who through their family trust had endowed scholarships for young men to attend our school. Though most of my direct contact has been through you, Chris, and your immediate family, I did have the privilege to meet and spend time with Richard on some of his travels to our country. Richard had a considerable presence and immediately struck me as a person of great substance, vision, and determination. He called a spade, and he got things done. As I got to know the Hugo-Hamman family more intimately, I realized that the history of their family was deeply entwined with the very fabric of our school. Richard's mother, Hugo-Hamman, worked in the tuck shop for 7 years and was an institution and much loved by all the boys at our school at that time. Richard's sister, Sally Puller, was a highly respected member of our school governing body and as a talented architect designed the Whitefoot Pavilion. Richard's own worldview was deeply shaped through personal experience of what he witnessed of the horrors of apartheid, particularly the Group Areas Act and resulting forced removals right here in Newlands. Determined to do whatever he could to rectify these evils, and his commitment to social justice remained with him until his final hour. His legacy will live on in our school, and his vision resonates strongly with SACS's commitment to be the best school, not in South Africa, but for South Africa. In 2024, Richard was awarded the highest honor our school can bestow on an alumni, the Spectator Agenda Award. Richard was too sick to travel to receive this accolade, and Chris received it on his behalf and read his deeply impactful speech to us at our prize giving last year. I want to read a few words from the citation written for Richard on receipt of that award. And these are just a few bits. It details all his successes in the field of law and the amazing innovations that drove those successes. But for me, this is what's Prince Richard, you have achieved remarkable success in your professional life, but you have always remained grounded and deeply appreciative of the good fortune life has presented you. You have been determined to give back to the school as you have very generously to other charities in Nepal and Australia. Your benevolence has been felt on the school campus, where you have contributed to the restoration of J.E. de Villiers boarding house and Henshelwood House. Through your philanthropy, you have also endowed in perpetuity 14 Hugo-Hamman scholarships at SACS. The scholarships are all-encompassing and highlight your generosity of spirit. Your belief is that the recipients would leave SACS with a broad-based education and a treasured value system, with your ultimate hope being for them to prove capable leaders in society. Certainly that vision is right there before our eyes. And then later on, courage, strength of character, integrity, respect, self-belief, grit, and resilience are the qualities that have shaped your life. These are qualities we hope all SACS alumni carry throughout their lives. Visionary, lawyer, businessman, benefactor, philanthropist, Richard Hugo-Hamman, it is with profound pride that the South African college schools bestow on you the Spectator Agenda Award. Let us be judged by our deeds. President Shushi travelled to Australia to be with Richard in his final days. And from that group that you started, Chris, there were many beautiful and wonderful tributes. From a school perspective, this one resonated with me. And on the first day of our boys in grade 8, I always say to them, look to your left, look to your right. In 30 years' time, when you need someone in your life outside of your immediate family, that's the person that you are going to call. You leave SACS after these 5 years with so much more than just a matric certificate. I found this a beautiful endorsement of both Richard, his friends, and our school. And it reads as follows. Throughout our junior school years, going back to the early 1960s, we sat in classrooms together. We played marbles and spun tops at lunchtime. In high school, we read English literature, learned maths, science, Latin, and history. We ate lunch on the fields and congregated in the tuck shop. All the while, we absorbed lessons of character. The bond between us is unshakable, and the sax voice is clear. Richard, you have not only spread the name and swelled the fame of the SAC, you have set a fine example and inspire each of us. Your insight and contribution has helped transform SACS into an educational institution of great value in 21st century South Africa. We are proud to say you were our classmate and great friend. As the sun sets on the SACS quadrangle, we salute you for your courage and determination. Well played, Richard. And I know some of these gents are here today, and someone listening on the stream. They being Peter Graham, Graham Brown, Tom Davey, Donald Fridgen, Robin Leviathan, Tim Morn, Stephen Ron, Ian Sigunowski, and Keith Vecht. There were some beautiful tributes as well from some of the Hugo-Hamman scholarship recipients. We're going to hear from Becca just now, so I'm not going to read his wonderful tribute. This was another one. I'm sending all strength, love, and light to you, Dr. Hugo-Hamman, and your family in this hard time. I am honored to have heard and met Mr. Richard Hugo-Hamman and your family. Till this day, my heart is filled with gratitude for what you and your family have done for me, and I will forever be grateful and humbled by your actions. Spectrum Agenda. That was from Indunako, Sydney, Indy. Richard Hugo-Hamman was an extraordinary human being. His legacy will live on through the love of his family and the many lives he has impacted and changed through our school. No longer call on to us. Be at peace and rest gently, Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Brand. Richard started at the school in 1962. He made lifelong friends, including Tom Davey, Jeffrey Cole, David Canty, and Tim Ron. We've invited Tim to speak this afternoon on behalf of all of Richard's friends.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tim Morn. Richard and I were classmates in Sachs Junior, in high school in the DCT Law faculty, and then colleagues in the legal fraternity here in Cape Town. However, more particularly, he was my friend. It is a great honor indeed and privilege for me to be asked by Richard's brother Chris to say a few words here today. I do so too in many ways on behalf of his lifelong friend and classmate Tom Davey, who finds himself due to unfortunate family circumstances to be unable to travel from Canada to be here today. Throughout their school careers, Tom and Richard played sports together, primarily swimming and water polo, and when the first water polo team formed by the late Chris Waller, way back in 1967. I'm told that team remained unbeaten in the Cape Town School League for 5 years. In chatting to Tom about today's address, it soon became apparent that our thoughts and memories of Richard were very similar. So what I'm going to present to you today is best described in musical parlance as a Tim Tom compilation tribute to our friend Richard. COVID was a tough time for many of us, and particularly for those of Richard's vintage. But one of the positives to come out of COVID and the isolation rule was the influence on meetings via Zoom, where your locality for the purposes of conversation was irrelevant. Richard was part of what became known in terms of our 50-year class reunion as the class of 71. Sounds like a movie, I know. And for that 50th reunion some years ago, it was incredible how many of our class communicated via Zoom dial-in, literally from all over the world. And that reunion would not have been the same had it required a physical presence. Richard was then part of that. A number of us have since kept up that contact with him, either via WhatsApp or Zoom, and followed his stellar career, and more recently his very sad illness. However, true to his modest nature, Richard never mentioned the amazing work that he did here at the school with the establishment of the Hugo-Hamman Foundation, and many of the scholars and beneficiaries are here today. There is an irony, of course, that I should be standing here on this particular spot delivering this tribute to Richard, as this particular area was regarded during our days at school as hallowed to it, and to be avoided at all times. One never ventured down this particular path. I'll show you where you could go. Or onto this particular portion of the pod. Because on my right-hand side over there was the office of the legendary boss. You believe you and me could see through closed curtains and even closed doors. So we never walked this path here just in case the boss was looking for someone who needed some discipline in his office, which was under the watchful eye of Audrey Porter, the mother of Ivan, our classmate. Richard would really be smiling to himself now, I know. If you could see I was speaking of him from this very spot and announcing to you all that he had shot the lights out after leaving school. This is all the more significant when the man in the office over there told Richard after passing standard 8 that he possibly, quote, reached the ceiling of his academic career. And why not? True. And that's how wrong the boss proved to be. And for those of you who are sex holders of the boss era, we realized very quickly that Richard did anything but, quote, go to the anti-slugger, quote, which was the boss's favorite assembly line. Like a lot of us who intended trying to improve our employment prospects, we enrolled for further study. The house in the hill behind me, UCT, and Richard had in a way prepared for that because he was a Latin scholar. He was forced to endure many months and years of laborious Latin lectures and reciting the Roman Mass and science and science. As his life unfolded in the computer software space, perhaps with hindsight, bookkeeping may have been a better choice, as opposed to Latin. But Richard clearly has a natural ability for figures. Tom and I had first experienced of Richard's undoubted gift for matters mathematical, as it was he, if I recall correctly, who told Tom and I in our early days in the trip at the Royal Standard in Nova, Friday night, for £1 to buy me 5 Louis Lake and It's amazing how that kind of trivia sticks in one's mind, and the number of times I've done that 5 times 19 cents calculation when I see the prices of beers today. Of course, Forries was off limits up the road in those days, as it was frequented by some non-teetotaling sex teachers who remain anonymous in terms of compliance with poppy legislation. And if you're caught on the premises at Forries in those days, and Donald Trump would say you're fired. Richard was not one to spend hours labouring over school books. He did, however, enjoy the subject matter, English literature in particular, and read Shakespeare and poetry beyond prescribed text. Tom and I did not consider him to be studious, but that said, he did gain a deep respect for the true liberal education he received at Saks. At this early stage of his life, which was deeply scarred by the pervasive systemic racial politics of the day. But within that landscape, Richard was able to appreciate the intrinsic worth of institutions such as constitutional democracy and always emphasize the human element, the people involved. This was to characterize his later legal life. After school, the Latin flavor continued, and the two of us then attended the law faculty at UCT. And when I say attended, I mean exactly that. We both sat in the back row just in case the lecturer felt he needed to pick on somebody close by to ask a few questions. That was not something Richard and I reached. Of course, the ultimate irony is that once Richard left UCT and embarked on his career, he ended up in the front row of life achievers in his philanthropic work, in particular at this great school. Not many of you know that Richard, whilst not being in the Barry Rongo mold, was in fact a film friendly at varsity, where he ran the film fun outlet, down opposite Arden Gardens in Claremont, after lectures at UCT. He very kindly arranged a similar position for me, where we both spent much time in the evenings and after lectures and over weekends, talking of life and the movies of the time, which were our now classics, the good, the bad, and the ugly, the old finger, etc. Ritual circles of friends grew hugely during those days, as every man and his dog called at the shop wanting a free projector and a movie late on a Sunday afternoon. After graduating with the BA LLB, Richard did articles here in Cape Town and passed his board exam with flying colours. And then ultimately went on his own, where he found his niche not in Latin-based law, but in accounting and legal software packages. After mastering the writing of his law accounting package program, Richard and his family took a huge plunge in 1992, which ultimately could have been described as a leap of faith, and decided to move to pastures new, namely Australia. Things didn't go too well when Richard arrived in Australia, as Aussie ball tampering in the form of software tampering was alive and well at that stage. In short, his program, which he had written, was pirated, copied, and Richard had to start from scratch again, rewriting his program at this time with major improvements. It certainly wasn't an easy path that Richard trod on the work front. But judging from the tribute paid by his former CEO and his employee, Christian, Richard was responsible for a remarkable turnaround in Leeds' fortunes. It was a huge turnout for Richard's memorial in Australia, and I had the benefit of a chat a few days ago to a lady, Sandra Menares, who is the head of IT at Leeds, currently. And perhaps I can just quote from an email she sent to me the other day, dealing with her interaction with Richard. She said he was an exceptional leader. He would turn his chair and invite you to sit and genuinely engage in conversation, whether about work, family, or in her case about her home country, Cuba. He was a true listener. She sent me an extract from the last email Richard sent to all of his new staff. And this, I think, will give you an idea of just how humble the man was, despite shooting the lights out in the work environment. Quote, this is Richard's quote from his email. I spent my first 6 years at Leeds working with Christian, the CEO. The title on my first business card was New South Wales Manager. At the time, we were only successful in New South Wales. As we grew, my title changed, and we became national in Australia, and then international. My career path progressed, and I became CEO in 2012. Christian and I obviously worked well together. I had a career path that couldn't have been dreamt of. It's been the privilege of my working life to have been entrusted by Christian and the board with this responsibility for so many years. During that time, we have transformed from being a small legal software, not even the biggest in our building at the time, to the biggest in the world. I've worked with so many of you around the world. I've been very lucky to have done so. That's quite a remarkable journey for a young boy from Saks to the CEO of the largest cloud-based legal software company in the world. For many years as a Saks boy, Richard, like all of the class of 71, walked around in a blazer with a very unique badge which had inscribed on it, "Spectre New Agenda." Richard, of course, like all of us, knew that it translated to mean let us be judged by our actions. But the significance of that particular motto only really hits home in later life. You reflect on what your life was about and what you had achieved. In school days, that motto was never really within Richard's class, nor anybody else in the class of 71. It was synonymous with the real rocket scientist who received that award for academic excellence. Richard returned to South Africa in 2017. He was acutely sensitive as to how things were, and had a clear sense, however, of how things ought to be. He immediately proffered a solution, which was grounded in his faith in liberal education, one that should be portable, and education that empowers one to think critically. He believed that such an education should be available to all. Hence, he established and endowed the scholarships to which I make earlier reference to the school, to enable boys from disadvantaged or less privileged circumstances to attend SAPS. Some of you will know how the school has honoured Richard as they did his brother Chris, respecting the agenda board. And I can honestly say that every member of the class of 71 was just so proud that Richard, our classmate and friend, is the only one of us that receives that award, which he so richly deserves. The award indeed highlights the need to continue the work that Richard considered so important, and to support the universal value central to the kind of education that builds a free society, a resilient one against the tyrannies of today's populist politics. Before concluding, when we resumed reconnect with Richard literally a few weeks prior to his sad passing, I became aware for the first time that Richard is a keen musician. In fact, one of his biggest regrets, he said, was not being a more proficient guitar player. We heard our 71 hard rock like Jackson continued to pluck the guitar strings under Richard's time of passing. It was not his favourite music. So band, I was hoping he would say it was Carly Blow in Woodline Oil or some other Aussie creation. But he without hesitation, to my relief, announced to us all it was Bob Dylan. A most unlikely favourite, I thought, was the only thing similar between the two I could readily identify, because Bob Dylan and Richard's early Silver Fox look, with hair turning grey at a very early age. I know very little of Bob Dylan, but I think that grey look could be attributed to a life of hard knocks. However, Bob Dylan's significance became more apparent when I deal with the lyrics of Bob Dylan, his most famous, and Richard's favourite song, and that is Blowing in the Wind. That song was sung by Bob Dylan as long ago as 1962, to the extent that Bob Dylan can sing. The backstory of Blowing in the Wind by Bob Dylan is revealed on Google as being a song written by Bob Dylan to become symbolic of fighting for the rights of people in the quest for social justice and peace. Undoubtedly, Richard's equivalent of Bob Dylan's song would be the legacy created by the Hugo-Hamman Foundation, where his philanthropic endeavours will live on forever. Finally, going back to Spectre New Agenda and the translation, let us be judged by our actions. Richard, you have been judged by your actions and exceeded all expectations. As Tom reminded me, if Richard was standing here today, he would say with sincere humility, quote, "This is not about me, it is about something far greater and far more important," unquote. He would urge us all to be grounded in the reality of the past, the facts and the truth, and to act in the present with a vision for the future. That, after all, and upon considered reflection, epitomizes the value and life lessons to us all of Richard Hugo-Hamman. Rest in peace, our dear friend and classmate Richard. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Becca Mbika is a second-year actuarial science student at UCT. He was in the first group of Hugo-Hamman Foundation Scholars at SAPS. He started in 2018 and matriculated with distinction in 2020. Becca.
Hello everyone, I hope everybody's doing well. So firstly, before we can even try and give tribute to Richard, I think we need to understand the context of the world that we currently live in. So from reading a story about another police station getting robbed to finding illegal army camps in the Free State, I'm pretty sure many of us say that we live in a banana republic. But this very same banana republic also saw many grave injustices. It saw the grave injustice of apartheid. And in a system that had such a strong propaganda machine, it was so easy to get lost and believe the fluff that these men said. But Richard saw through the mist and realized that he needed to do something to change other people's lives. He didn't just think about that. He took it as a calling from a very young age. Now, from a very young age, I can tell you, Richard was a very handsome kid, very nice kid, very adventurous. On a sunny day, he's probably one of those kids who will go outside, take their shoes off, run around barefoot. He'll always walk around with a bright, beautiful smile. He was always nice and super jovial. And then he grew. He entered university at the University of Cape Town. Now, as a student, he was a very strong student. He was a hard worker, and he was always determined to get things done. But he was not one of those students who were going to study 24 hours a day. No, that was not Richard. He'd probably go to class, sit at the back of the class, have a good time, maybe fall asleep one or two times in a few lectures. But when Richard needed to get something done, he'd always get something done. So I think that's another lesson that we can learn from Richard. He knew how to hold it down. And when things really needed to get done, and when you needed Richard the most, he'd always be there for you. And then if I just told you guys, he went into legal tech, made a killing in law, and then left. I refuse to believe that so many of us would be here today. Because the fact of the matter is, the thing that made Richard Richard was the type of person he was. And what type of person was he? Richard was someone who prioritized other people above himself. We look at the many people these days. The first time they make money, they'll either spend it on money, alcohol, or girls. We see that from many tenderpreneurs these days. But Richard never forgot the young calling that he got from a young age, that he wanted to change lives. Then he researched, he didn't just do this Hugo-Hamman scholarship thing overnight. Because he knew that it's not just the resource that you give to someone in order to change their life. It's order how you give that resource to that person. And then I can imagine he probably read many quotes. He probably said, if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, but if you teach him how to fish, you teach him for life. You probably thought about Mandela when he said that the most powerful weapon that you can give someone is education. And he studied. And he realized that the main problem that we have in this world is the system. We live in a system that constricts people from poor to poor up until they die. And he knew that the best way to get someone out of that rut of the system is through education. Because this is the fact of the world that we live in today. We have someone, they'll be born in a disadvantaged background. They also go to a disadvantaged school. They won't take school seriously. They don't get informed. We ask many people today, they're not informed about the economy. They're not informed about, hey, what's a free market? What's this? What's that? People are not educated. And the dangerous thing that happens when someone is not educated is that they can't make decisions for themselves. Then what happens? Many people get taken advantage of. We live in a world where politicians will play with people's emotions to use them. And what Richard knew is that if someone is educated, this person will have all the knowledge and the resources to be self-sufficient, make their own decisions, study, work hard, and create a better life for their family and other people. And this was the birth of the Hugo-Hamman scholarship. Additionally, even if Richard struggled, I can bet anyone here 10,000 rand. Even when Richard struggled, he'd probably never tell you. This is just the nature of the type of person he was. And the reason for this is embedded in the type of person he was. With Richard, his overarching goal was to improve the well-being of other people, no matter who you were. So if he had to share his baggage with you and that would make you feel bad, he would never do that. That was just the type of person Richard was. Always thinking about others before he even thinks about himself. And to go further and elaborate on this, he was not the type of person to have a desire or a need to be seen. Many times these days, when someone's about to do a good deed, they say, hey, take out the camera, take a picture of me. This is the world we live in. Many times if you go out and then a homeless person approaches you and asks you for 10 rand, your first thought will be like, okay, let me give this 10 rand. But now, when this person walks away, you'll be extremely disappointed if you don't see jets and cameramen coming out of nowhere and saying, well done, you just won 10 million rand for being a good Samaritan. That was not Richard. In fact, if this scenario actually happened, I'm willing to bet you my left kidney and 10,000 rand. That if that happened to Richard, he'd probably tell you, pass it over to the next person. But you know what, he wouldn't say that because remember he's Australian now, so he'd probably be like, well, pass it over to the next tiger, will you, mate? And then a message for the scholars. I know you guys have been listening to long speeches today, you guys are tired. Probably not going to remember anything today. But if there's one word I want you guys to remember today, is believe. Because Richard believed in each and every one of them. Now, that belief didn't just come for free. That belief came with trust, with expectation, and with hope. So in whatever you do going forward, keep the Richard dynasty going with you. Whenever you work at school, whenever you pray, just know Richard is always with you. Take it one day at a time. Also, I understand we all come from disadvantaged backgrounds. Even when I first came at SACS, I had immense imposter syndrome. I didn't feel like I was fitting in. But what I realized is Richard was the type of person that didn't just tell you, hey, believe in yourself. He wasn't the person to use a massive propaganda machine like me, and a sharp propaganda down your throat, say, hey, do this, do that, you're going to do this work, do that. No, that was not Richard. Richard is the type of person to give you the tools so that you can believe in yourself too. It doesn't even, in a more subtle, in more impactful way than I ever would. And a message to the family. I'd just like to ask you guys for a quick solid. Whenever you speak about Richard, please change your pronouns from was to is. Because the reality of the matter is, Richard is with us right now. One day when you have a child, when your child walks for the first time, Richard is going to be there. One day when you're in a tough interview at work is going tough, they give you a crazy problem, you don't think you're going to solve it. And for some reason, something just goes off in your brain, you solve it. Richard is whispering in your ear. One day when you marry, Richard is going to be there. But also, one day, also when you go to the afterlife, Richard is also going to be there. Because, let's face it, Richard did every single thing in this life on his own terms. He never left us, one bit. If you think about the game Call of Duty, just to conceptualize it for you guys. Think about us playing Call of Duty now. There's the battlefield, but there's also spectator mode. So spectator mode is when you can watch everybody, give guidance, etc. That's exactly what Richard is doing right now as we speak. He's guiding us from above. Even today, I had a job shadow that started at 9 a.m., but unfortunately I woke up at 8:55 a.m. And then, but I thought the day was over. I didn't even know what I was going to say today, but I managed to get to work at 9:17 a.m. and the day just went super awesome. I took my Uber there, took an Uber here, got here on time. This is Richard. Richard was with me today, and he's still with me right now. He's never left my side. So usually when I do these sad speeches, I never leave off with quotes, but just for Richard today, I think it's fitting we leave off with a nice quote in a Richardman Saxman like way. And the quote that I would like to leave everyone with is, "Our fingerprints never leave the lives we touch," by Judy Bloom. Thank you.
Richard has a daughter, Louise, and a son, Nicholas. I'm now going to ask my cousin Sebastian to read a message on behalf of Nicholas.
I follow the words of my cousin Nick. Good afternoon, everyone. As Richard's son, I am honored to have these words read for me as we celebrate the life of my late father. Dad's life was certainly a journey of life, love, celebration, struggle, immigration, success, and ultimately departure. His early days were started and spent on these very school grounds. Sachs started Dad's mold. His values and ethical outlook were formed through the prism of his experience both at the school and as a happy, adventurous child running around Newlands and its surrounds with his siblings and a cohort of friends, some of which are here today. So here we are again, many years later, same place, some of the same, but many new faces and a new generation of individuals who will hopefully share in Dad's mold. Dad always used to say that immigrating was the hardest thing he ever did. We battled as a family in the early years, for many years, in a new country. But after 2 decades of dedication, hard work, and sheer backbone, Dad found where he was supposed to be and what he was supposed to be doing in the world. His work ethic was undeniable, and his experience and talent within legal software saw him at the peak of his career late in life. He used to say, "I'm going to work until I'm at least 80. Not believe it." His peak coincided with the creation of the Hugo-Hamman Foundation, a labor of love for both him and his brother Chris. Created to better a school that meant so much to him, to give opportunity to those less fortunate, and to instill real diversity in society. When I was 10 years old, Dad decided to send me to Saxon Grove Primary School, something which at the time I wasn't too happy with, mainly because there weren't any girls there. But although my time was short there as we immigrated in 1992, I am glad that I did some time at the school. One day I came home and told him my new teacher's name was Mr. Joubert, to which he almost fell off his seat, as it was the same teacher he had had almost 30 years before that. Even the teachers love it here at Science. To all of the family here today, thank you for coming and opening your hearts again for Dad. To all of the friends here today, Dad remembered you all. It didn't matter how much time went by, he would remember tiny details until hilarious stories about back in the day. Too many to mention with such an. In his last week, I pressed Dad for a lot of these stories. I wanted to hear them one last time, and it helped him remember things, taking him back to a time being carefree, happy, healthy, and full of optimism. We traveled back in time together, discussing many things about our home and birthplace in this beautiful place, South Africa. And this I am grateful. Although it's been over 30 years, you can take a boy out of Africa, but you can never take Africa out of the boy, is what we always say to each other. Dad is with us, always, everywhere. He's in the wind, he's in the stars, in our hearts, forever. I bid thee farewell, my friend. We all thank you for everything you have done for us, and will continue to do for us, even as you fly pain and worry free amongst the sun. Thanks again to everyone here today and to all the families who helped organize this memorial. I know it would have meant the world to them. Much love.
Thank you, Sebastian. My father, Christopher, Richard's younger brother, will now offer tribute to Richard.
Family and friends, good afternoon. Yes, I'm Christopher, the younger brother. Less hirsute. Absolutely less handsome. I honor in their absence Richard's wife Lynn and his kids Louise and Nicholas. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share with you today some of my life with Richard, and in so doing, represent our parents, Tom and Jenny, his sisters Elizabeth and Sally, his nephews David and Sebastian, his niece Tessa, and my daughters Chloe, Clementine and Sarah. I don't think that will be the hardest part of what I'm going to say. I enjoyed Nicholas's reference, read by Sebastian, to his move from a co-ed school. The last time Richard visited South Africa was on the occasion of my sister's death, almost 4 years ago. And we had a function at my house, and many of the esteemed Sax people were there. And we were talking about the school at the present and what might happen in the future with boys like this. And it was his turn to talk. And he said, well, real transformation at Sax will happen when you finally admit girls. The two headmasters here in front of me were both there. They both went very pale and almost required resuscitation. It's wonderful to be here in this memorial quadrangle. This quadrangle recognizes the contributions of men from this school who perished in 2 world wars. It resonated strongly for Richard and I. Our uncle, Alwyn Crampton, is on that World War II clock behind you. It also now remembers those persons, men and women, who died in the struggle for a free, non-racial and democratic South Africa. It really is an important place. It's interesting how immigration has again become unpopular, even controversial. The white people of European descent and many other peoples here in South Africa, the vast majority of Australians, Canadians, Americans, North and South, all settlers. It used to hurt being labelled a settler in my own country. It hurts less when we embrace our past and just acknowledge the fact we are all settlers. Only then can you rightly ask the pertinent question, so what? Our mother was a first-generation South African. Her parents immigrated from Amsterdam during World War I. Our paternal grandmother, Nurse Elizabeth Ruck, was from Cirencester in Gloucester and married our grandfather during that same war. Both of them served at 2 military hospitals in Wynberg. My grandfather, Dirk, Hugo-Hamman, Afrikaner, South African, French and German stock. The Hugo ancestry traced to Daniel Hugo arriving at the Cape of Good Hope from Reims in 1688. And Johannes Hugo-Hamman from Saxony in 1732. Why is this important? Well, Richard was an intensely curious person with a passion for South African history. More importantly, he came from immigrant stock. And at the age of 39, he joined the South African diaspora and became himself an immigrant. He could give lessons on the challenges, the loneliness, the isolation, the longing for home, for the love of family and friends. He spoke often of a lack of a shared history with people he met. That common thread that we find in conversation with people in our own place, he never had. And not a small matter, the betrayal of a business partner in Sydney. Curiously, another South African. And the financial ruin that followed within his first decade in Australia. People have spoken of his resilience, and I'll come back to that. He never gave up on his vision for the digital environment in the legal profession. He never once considered returning to South Africa, despite substantial encouragement from his family, myself included. He was unwavering in his commitment to Australia. Although I must say he enjoyed a parochial interest in our sport. He suggested when I saw him in Australia the day before he died, that at his memorial in Australia, it might be best not to mention the rugby or the cricket. Both Brendan Grant and Tim Warne have shared details of his successful career, providing us with a window into what made him so successful. I enjoyed that quote from someone that he appointed early on, Sam Gamanari, particularly, because it gave me a great insight into what it was that made him this success. I must say, though, despite those kind words, that he could be very businesslike in his personal life as well. I learned that when he said things like, "I suggest you try this," or "Why don't you do it this way, Chris?" It meant quite strongly, just do it that way. He liked to manage. He loved to talk with friends and colleagues. He enjoyed sharing his knowledge with others. And he had a wonderful sense of humor. Right to the end, in the last minutes of his life. I'd like to share with you some things about our lives growing up together here in Cape Town, which shaped his character, before I reflect a little on what we've done in the last decade. Richard liked to acknowledge our privilege, and he often did. Not that we came from wealth, but our parents were professional. Our mother, a registered nurse, theatre nurse. Our father only qualified as a doctor a year after Richard was born, and became a specialist in radiology 10 years later. The first 7 years of Richard's life, we lived in Milton, where Richard liked to remind me, we had paraffin boxes for bedside tables. Richard and I shared a bedroom until he was 16 years old. But we never went hungry, and as far as we were concerned, we never lacked for anything. We moved to Cannon Street, Newlands, up the road in 1962, and we grew up with this entire forest reserve as our playground. That black and white picture on the back of your program was taken in the forest just across the road from my house. He had friends always, and some like Tom Davy loved Richard and our family so much. He was a brother, and he still is. We played guitar together, and the songbook of our lives was Bob Dylan, Lennon McCartney, Leonard Cohen, Crosby, Stills, Nash, Young, and then also Bob Dylan, a lot. We dreamed of being rock stars, and I think Richard actually became that. We rode bicycles in the mountain forest, and we went to great heights. We hiked as kids with our father in the mountain every Sunday. On one such hike, when he was only 7, he became ill. He was admitted to Curtis Care Hospital that night. He survived paralyzing poliomyelitis before polio became a vaccine-preventable disease, and before ventilation was available for paralyzed children. Survival was what he did in Australia for his first 10 years. He survived. He learned that skill at an early age. We received a fine education. My sisters Liz and Sally went to Rustenburg. Richard and I, like our father and our uncles John and Crampton, came here to Sax. This public or state school, the oldest in the country, founded in 1829. The lessons, classes, swimming pool, sports fields, all in this glorious setting, were right here on our doorstep in Newlands. A mere 15 minutes walk from our home. We both put a considerable amount of effort into our time here at Sax. But I can assure you that we extracted more from the school, as I hope these boys will do during their tenure here. The University of Cape Town literally grew from this school, the South African College. And it was there that we went after school. Richard to law, my sister Liz to computer science, Sally to architecture, and me to medicine. The abundance of opportunity and choice at the school, even back then, was not wasted on us. My sister Liz, Richard, and I started swimming competitively at a young age. Newlands swimming pool in summer, Long Street swimming pool in winter. Chlorine appears to have been an addiction. We all represented Western Province. We had a wonderful time. We travelled the country, usually in a cut bus, but often by train, to Kimberley, Bloemfontein, Johannesburg, Pretoria, in a time when trains still ran in South Africa. For boys from a single-sex school, we met girls. We had great fun, but it was also hard. We started training in winter and would swim every evening thereafter, August through March. December through February, we would swim in the morning before school and after school at 5. 3 to 3.5 hours a day. We ate a lot. The swimming story resonates. We learned that success requires hard work. We learned the self-discipline dividend, which we hope our scholars will likewise. Discipline, diligence, dedication. That I have little doubt. Going back to swimming metaphor is the source of Richard's grit and resilience. That's what steered him through those years of incomprehensible hardship in their first years in Australia. As Tim has mentioned, the other thing we did together was play water polo. Richard and Tom Davey were in grade 8 when Chris Waller introduced the sport. I started in '69 and joined the team. There was no swimming pool here at the high school, so we did everything at Newlands Pool. With Tom, Richard and I represented Western Province under 19. We were magnificent in Boksburg in 1972. We were the unbeaten champions of South Africa. We then played for the University of Cape Town together later on, after he had come back from his military service. What a highlight of my life, playing together with Richard. It's the one thing we did together in the team, and I enjoyed it so much. I'm reminded that the thing about teams is that you have them and the people in them for life. His colleagues saw him as fundamentally a team player and consequently a successful leader of people. I'm reminded you only follow people if you want to. Like our father Tom and my grandfather Dirk actually, played first team rugby both at school and at the University of Cape Town. Despite this very strong family pedigree, Richard gave up rugby in grade 11. Much to the annoyance of the headmaster, Robin Whiteford, mentioned by Tim. Whiteford was an intimidating war veteran and a classic scholar. He summoned Richard to his office over there, and the assumption was that Richard would be cane, as you were in those days. Whiteford, this time, without his customary sarcasm, told him, Hugo-Hamman, you must play rugby at this school. Must. Richard said, no, sir. I'm not enjoying it. And my father told me that if I'm not enjoying the game, I should not play. The headmaster said to him, well, if that's your decision, then I won't make you a prefect next year. To which Richard replied, but sir, you never asked. Brave and hubris, not cane. Courage at a young age, but through life, whilst living with cancer the last years, and ultimately also in death. But a little anecdote, Whiteford had a very good memory for names and faces. I think that's a headmaster and headmistress characteristic. I can share with you that despite the praise from Tim, Richard spent many years doing Latin 1 at UCT. Many years. Robin Whiteford had left this school in 1972, only to reappear as a senior lecturer at UCT. The new science lecture theatre, which is placed on University Avenue at the far end, had entrances at the front, and there's a very steep lecture theatre. It had two entrances right at the top in the clouds. Shortly in his university career, Richard arrived late, perhaps with Tim, and sneaked into the back row up there. As he sat down, the lecturer, Robin Whiteford, said, no, Hugo-Hamman, you are most welcome to my lecture, but do not be so shy. Come forward and sit in the front room, where you'll no doubt hear me a great deal better. We grew up with a culture of giving and of social responsibility. Our mother worked for several charities, most importantly amongst young women in the 60s when talking sex was taboo for her generation, but oral contraception in the 60s society had become new and necessary. Our father at the time, when rugby was an amateur sport, coached UCT for 10 years. So when Richard created wealth, he was naturally a philanthropist. He greatly valued the two gifts we received, a stable, loving family and a world-class, broad-based, value-driven education here at this school. It's hard for a young audience to understand growing up in apartheid South Africa, where the group areas act dictated where you lived, separate amenities defined where you went to school, job reservation determined where you might work. Where, I wonder, did you experience your first injustice? We walked home from school every day along Newlands Avenue at the top. We passed Newlands Village, where our neighbours, people of colour, lived and worked and had done so for nearly 200 years. This community was disrupted and the people forcibly removed from their homes and replanted in Manenberg. Predominantly, Richards Plain didn't exist at that time. This was 1966, and as young kids, we witnessed that deep trauma. Richard was scarred by these events, politically conscious at a young age, and socially aware throughout his life. He recognized that black people of our generation were denied the privilege of the fine education we had received at what was then a school for only white girls. We met by chance in New York in 2016, and we had a conversation over coffee in Grand Central Station. We spoke of many things, inter alia the fact that I would be honored by the school, and he decided to travel to Cape Town to be here for that function. Whilst he was here, we toured the high school and the junior school. We found one of the boarding house roofs in a shocking state of repair. Disrepair, I should say. He said, we must fix this. And we replaced the roof at De Villiers' house. But on a human level, he recognized at once the urgent need for transformation, for increasing that diversity amongst pupils and amongst teachers. We started talking about scholarships for black children from disadvantaged backgrounds, who with help could receive that fine education that we had received here at the school. He would put up the money if I'd volunteer the work. Mostly, with much help from my daughter Clementine, that's how it's happened. So he endowed our foundation, which will have 15 boys on full and comprehensive scholarships at the school, one in each grade in perpetuity. That's Richard. That's his legacy. His message to us, I think, is ever strong. Give time, give money, help your community, live a life of service to others. The changes that he has made to the lives of these boys and their futures at the moment are intangible. We in the foundation, their families, and the schools value and appreciate his gesture. For you scholars, the gift of education are life-changing and lifelong. Richard hoped you boys would enjoy your experience, would value your privilege, would participate in every possible way in the lives of the school. He hoped the education would ensure you fulfill your potential. He hoped you would work hard, reap the rewards, and give back to the school and to society. You all have something in you. You all have something in you. And this school is the best chance it will be revealed. Becca has represented you with such honor. I hope for you that you will make us proud whilst you are at school and as you go forward in your lives. On a personal level, this enterprise had us working together with shared objectives, and he loved that. We agreed, we shared our vision, we disagreed, we even quarreled, but it was always proper and always necessary. It brought us back together like nothing else since we threw that ball around in the pool. Always a team. My first friend. We still are. People have asked me over the years, are you close? I've realized this past few months we were, and more than I ever imagined. Richard managed the end of his life with the same precision he managed his business. Of sound mind, cognitively clear, he was determined to see through the process, and that process was assisted suicide. Not everyone agrees we have a right to life, and in the face of intractable illness, to choose death. I certainly do. We have some way to go in this country to achieve the recognition of assisted suicide as a human right. I'm grateful that Australia was able to provide him with that choice. Living the last months of his life in shocking indignity, he was finally dignified in death. It was my privilege to be with him and his immediate family in the final minutes of his life. I've been witness to far too many deaths in my professional life, but this was a very different experience. It was, of course, great sadness, but with Bob Dylan singing Tambourine Man quietly in the background, there was also exquisite beauty. It's hard for me to stop. We were fortunate that when God handed kids to parents, we got Tom and Jim. I've been fortunate he chose Richard as well. I'm immensely proud of my brother. Henry van Dyke wrote a beautiful piece. And I'm going to end with this. It's called The Sailing Ship. What is dying? I'm standing on the seashore. The ship sails to the morning breeze and starts for the ocean. She's an object, and I stand watching her, till at last she fades from the horizon. And someone at my side says, she is gone. Gone where? Gone from my sight. That is all. She's just as large in the masts and spars and hull as she was when I saw her, and just as able to bear her load of living freight to its destination. The diminished size and the total loss of sight is in me, not in her. And just at that moment, when someone at my side says she is gone, there are others who are watching her, coming, and other voices take up a glad shout. There she comes, and that is her. Thank you to all of you who've been here this afternoon. Thank you for your kindness, your love, and your support. Richard hoped and believed there was indeed another country. So as it says on your program, I'd like to stand and join the orchestra and sing with love, compassion, and feeling. I vow to be my country. Thank you. Thank you.